You're alive.
All right, great. Hi, everybody. Welcome to our AI for our PR Pros workshop today. This is a workshop that's presented by the Hispanic Public Relations Association, or HPRA, as many of you might know us by. I'm Sonia Diaz. I'm the president of HPRA. HPRA is a public relations trade association organization dedicated to providing Hispanic professionals, both citizens and up and coming, with the tools they need to grow and succeed in our industry. More importantly, we are committed to educating and empowering professionals from across all industries and disciplines about the growing influence and power of the multicultural market and increasing representation of Hispanic talent in PR through our National Scholarship and Mentorship Program, all of which is made possible by our great sponsors who provide us with the resources we need to bring you this great programming. I'm both honored and excited to have today's guest with us today for this very relevant and much needed professional development session. So I've known this now for 15 years, maybe. We first met in a DEI workshop when we worked together at our former agency. We've remained friends over the years, and he's what I consider one of the OGs of digital. And during that time, he has continued to lead digital initiatives for global agencies, and now he's leading his own consulting firm. Excited that he's going to be here bringing this workshop for you guys. I want to remind you, please provide your questions in the chat, and we're going to have some time at the end for you to be able to talk to Chris personally and get some of your questions answered. So without further ado, Chris G.
Thank you so much, Sonia. I will move you over and come over to the main stage. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much, Sonia, for the kind words. OG always reminds me that, I'm an old guy, but, I like to think seasoned and been around for a long time, or better words to describe it, but I am in PR. Today's topic is one that there's a lot of excitement and a lot of intrigue around, and probably a little bit of nervousness with respect to AI, and certainly within our industry, within the PR industry. So I'm really excited to talk with you guys today. I'm really excited for HPRA to have me, and with that, we'll just dive right in. So just as an overview for what we'll cover today, I'm going to do sort of just an overview about AI, what it is, dive right into Chat GPT. We'll talk a little bit about, for me, I think that the best use case for AI, really among them for those of us in our industry, really comes down to things like getting over writer's block, being able to go from the blank page to a workable draft and save that time. I was talking to someone a little while ago, and they were saying, oh, well, I want ChatGPT to basically do my work for me. And that's not the right way to look at it. It's not going to do your work for you, but it can help you save time. And I like to look at it, we'll get into this a little bit later, as the ultimate goal is to be able to save an hour here or there, right? And that may not sound like much, but then when you think about it, what would you do if you had an extra hour in your day, right? If it always feels like a big win when you have this meeting that you really aren't really sure that you should really be attending, but it's on your calendar, and then all of a sudden it gets canceled and you get an hour back in your day. What if you could do that every day? And that's really the promise of Chat GPT in terms of like supercharging our productivity and buying us back some time. So we'll talk about that. We'll talk about some practical applications, and I'll go into some real use cases for Chat GPT. And then I'll dive right in. I'll get out of the presentation and dive right into the browser, into the Chat GPT application, walk through some of the features, and actually show you some prompts and some things and ways that I like to use Chat GPT to save time. From there, we'll kind of go right into some ethical considerations, and there are many. I think there are a lot of things that various companies and organizations need to really think through with respect to AI. And so we'll kind of have a little conversation about that. I'll talk a little bit about sort of what I think, where I see the future going with respect to AI and PR. I have some thoughts on it, and anybody who's followed my LinkedIn, you've probably seen some of those. But I'm not an alarmist. I'm very much of an AI enthusiast, and very much of an optimist too. So I'm not sort of that the robots are going to come kill us type of person. I'm really more so on the side of what the possibilities are, but I'm also very sober-minded of the fact that there are a lot of implications and there are going to be some disruptions. And then after that, the last 15 minutes of the session, we'll dedicate to some Q&A. So with that, we'll dive right in. So first, understanding AI. Being able to understand what AI is, I think that there are a range of opinions about what it is, but essentially, boiling it down to a nutshell, AI are basically just a set of technologies, computer systems, and programs that are enabled to do things and perform tasks that are typically would have been performed by humans, right? 5 years ago, 6 years ago or so, we didn't have, at the consumer level, technology that could do that. AI has been around for quite some time, but in terms of our fingertips and the masses, we didn't really have access to it. In terms of its capabilities, AI can do many things really well. There are things it doesn't do very well. It's not very creative, right? But it can do things very well. It can automate tasks. It can do research. It can analyze massive quantities of data, etc. It can really be a great co-host and a co-pilot for us humans. In terms of its relevance for PR, there are a lot of things that are happening from an AI perspective that directly implicate and impact PR and PR professionals. And we'll dive into some of those things a little bit later into the session. All right. So here we are. So that's a little bit about AI overall, but really we're here to talk specifically about Chat GPT. There are a number of AI tools out there. I'm sure many of you have heard lots of different tools and products, etc. But one of the things that's really interesting, I think more relevant for public relations in terms of Chat GPT, is because it's the best of the tools out there in terms of like creating written content. And as much as our industry has changed and evolved, I'm an example of that. I'm a digital executive within the industry. But as much as it really has kind of evolved and grown into many different things and many different formats, it's still very much at the core, whether we're doing video, whether we're doing a podcast, etc. At the core of it really resides with writing. And so, I think that because ChatGPT does it so much better than some of its competitors right now, I think it really is becoming the go-to tool in terms of generative AI for PR professionals. So basically, a couple things about ChatGPT. It's a large language model developed by OpenAI. The core functionality is the written word, although it does now, a lot of those capabilities are being extended because it's being embedded into a lot of different third-party tools and products. And in terms of applications for PR, and I'll go into some common use cases in a few minutes, but there are a lot of things that already ChatGPT is being used for, whether we realize it or not. Social media posts, social media responses, press releases, holding statements, lots of things like that. So we'll get into the specifics of some of the common use cases for ChatGPT. And one really quick note I just want to say before I move on to the next slide. Don't worry about taking screen grabs or taking copious notes or things like that during this presentation. I am going to, I've set up a link on my website, chrisg.me/HPRA, where you can get this deck, download the material, so you don't have to really, you can just kind of pay attention. You don't have to worry about capturing or recording everything that I cover here. So I'll just kind of hide this for a second, but I'll bring that back toward the end of the session, just in case you didn't get a chance to capture it. All right, AI and writer's block. Maybe it's just me. I'm the only one, right, that has that sort of anxiety whenever I've got to write something and there's the blank page staring at me. I mean, it happened when I was coming up with the content for this session, right? I was like, oh my God, what am I going to say? I knew what to say, right? This is stuff I talk about all the time, but there's always that feeling, there's that little voice in the back of your head. Maybe it's just me that says, hey, you're a fraud. Today's the day everybody's going to find out, right? So for me, the best thing about ChatGPT is that it can help you burst through that sort of paralysis of that first blank page, the writer's block, and help you just get things moving. Like I said before, it's not intended to do the work for you, but the best thing I think that it can do is help you get past that writer's block, and get workable drafts that you can then start to finesse and move to a more finished state. So we don't want to be like the lady in the background where she basically is eating donuts and having Chat GPT do the work for her. Like I said before, we want to think about Chat GPT as more of a co-pilot, as opposed to uh, uh, being able to do the work for us. I think I might have, not so sure what happened with the, oh, there we are, I'm back. So a few ways that where AI and specifically ChatGPT can help. For one, like I said before, it's not going to do your work for you. The best possible outcome is getting a first draft. AI, and specifically ChatGPT, it's not super creative. It's going to do okay work. It's not going to do great work. But what it will do is get you a really good first draft that you can then personalize and finesse, right? And like I said before at the outset, the goal here is really to save 45 minutes, an hour, 2 hours, etc. And over time, as it becomes a bigger part of your workflow, you'll start to be able to save more time. Saving an hour here or there will turn into saving an hour every day. And again, I think the ideal state is to be able to get to where you can really focus more time on sort of like things that GPT can't do, things that are more creative, things that require more deep thinking, etc. It's great at kickstarting the content creation process. It's great at suggesting ideas. It's really good at coming up with variations. And for most of us, a lot of what we do on a regular basis is take a lot of the same information and expand it. Like a lot of times I'll have a blurb that I need to expand into a full page Word doc, or a bunch of bullets in over across 4 slides or so, or 5 slides. This, excuse me, this is something that ChatGPT does really, really well, right? If you've got information, you feed it to ChatGPT, it's really good at saying, okay, you know what? Take this statement and turn it into a bunch of social posts. Take this 2-page memo and expand it to 5 or 6 PowerPoint slides, or take these 5 or 6 PowerPoint slides and crunch it down to, a brief summary, or something that can fit on 1 page of a Word doc. It's also really great at suggesting ideas. And also, I already covered ideas. It's also really good at generating different styles. And I'm going to show you guys in a few minutes how you can generate a style guide that you can save within ChatGPT or save in another application and apply to future writing. It can also come up with ideas that you hadn't thought of. One of the great things that I think not a lot of people use ChatGPT for is you can actually do a Q&A, like a Q&A where you can set ChatGPT up to ask you questions. So if you're going on an interview or if you're going to meet with someone for the first time on a business setting, et cetera, and you want to be able to kind of anticipate the questions that they're going to ask, you can just have ChatGPT act as that person, and it'll go in line and do a Q&A with you in an actual live session. So that's pretty cool. And I'll walk you through that in a couple of minutes as well. So just a number of practical applications, and this list could have been 3 times as long, right? But really, basically, I would say that it's more so what's not on the list. There's probably fewer things. It would be a shorter list to kind of list all the things that you can't do at ChatGPT from a PR perspective than what you can. But you can see it's pretty expansive. I mean, for thought leadership, speeches, social posts, etc. ChatGPT is great at helping with that. FAQs. Like I said before, you can actually anticipate questions, etc. You can ask ChatGPT to be your target audience and say, what questions would you have if you were this person or that person in your persona? Internal communications, same thing. It's really good at, you can feed it information, you can feed it previous internal communications, and it's great at sort of like mimicking that style and coming up with something fresh and new in the style of how you communicate. Of course, press releases. It does things that have a pre-existing format really well. And things like influencer outreach, media pitches, all of those things. I mean, it does all of those types of tasks really well. And again, like I said before, whether you're aware of it or not, companies, agencies, consultants are using ChatGPT for all of these tasks and many more. All right, so let's gonna dive into some demos. So in a second, I will hide the presentation, and then I'll jump over, share my browser screen, and then we'll just kind of like walk you through a couple of demos. So here are a few things that I'll walk you through in the demos. I'm going to show you how to prompt Chat GPT to get better content. I'm going to show you how you can use Chat GPT to apply styles for consistency. And I actually have here, I'm going to use Chat GPT to generate slide content. And I can do that and probably will do that, but I actually may instead show you how to do a live Q&A. But if we have time, I'll see if I can do both. The only reason I was contemplating not doing it is because depending on where I end up with time, sometimes jumping over from Chat GPT to PowerPoint can take a little bit of time, but we'll see where we get to. All right, so let's see. I'm gonna take this away for now. Let's see if I can share my screen. Okay, so I'll go ahead and create a new chat. So first thing, if some of you are not familiar with ChatGPT, one of the things you'll see here right at the very top is that there are a couple different options, right? So if you're not familiar with ChatGPT, or if you only have the free version, then you more than likely will be working with, if you have the free version, you'll be working with GPT 3.5. If you have the paid version, $20 a month, and I highly recommend that you subscribe to it. Not only will you be in GPT-4, which is faster and can handle more complex tasks than GPT 3.5, but also with the Plus subscription, they don't limit you. Like, for instance, with the free version, there are a lot of outages, especially during peak times where a lot of people are using ChatGPT. You don't really get that as much when you're on the Plus version, which is handy, especially if you're using it to help boost your efficiency. The last thing you want is to expect to be able to use it to help with some really laborious tasks and then find out that you have to wait a half an hour or 45 minutes because there's an outage, right? So that's one thing. But the other thing too that you'll see here as I hover over the screen is with the Plus version, you have the opportunity to use plugins. And in some cases, plugins can be a game changer. There are a couple of things that I think are really advantageous about some of the plugins that ChatGPT uses. One of which, and I'll share this in a second, is the ability to upload documents to ChatGPT. There is a character limit. So, a lot of times I'll copy and paste content directly into the window. But it is advantageous if you have to feed it lots of data, a full report, things like that, to be able to just upload it into the system and then have ChatGPT analyze the data. So I'll show you that in a second. So in any event, let's see. All right. And as I mentioned before, all of the prompts for that I'm about to show you are in the deck. So if those of you want to be able to replicate some of the things that I'm doing now, you'll be able to do that and find those prompts in the deck, in the slides. So rather than go through the process of trying to type a whole bunch of data into this window here at a small size, I wrote the prompts out before, right? So here, I want to just show how you can kind of like create some content within ChatGPT. So here's the prompt that I created. Basically, create a 200-word LinkedIn post about generative AI. I find that it's helpful to be specific when you're working with ChatGPT, right? So I'm saying not only should the tone be professional and optimistic, you could vary whatever your instructions are in a prompt for whatever you'd like it to be. This is an example that I want to use, professional and optimistic. But I also like to tell ChatGPT to hit on some very specific points when I'm having it come up with content for me. So I'm writing here, AI, hit on the point that AI can boost your efficiency, that soon ChatGPT will be embedded in routine applications, making it more ubiquitous. And also note that for all AI's promise, there's bound to be disruption, right? And like I said before, I started out by saying how many words I want, etc. So I'm just going to press the prompt here. And you can see it's starting to come up with the content. Now, like I said before, I only would use Chat GPT for a first draft. What it comes up with is okay, but what it's coming up with here isn't quite how I would structure a piece of content if I was going to do a LinkedIn post, right? So that's okay. What I can do is I can, as I said before, I can say, okay, this is a good first draft. Maybe what I'll do is ask it to generate another option if I don't really love this one too much. So I just hit the regenerate button. So now it's giving me a second option. You can do this over and over again. Eventually, if you keep doing it, it'll ask you, what is it that you don't like, or did you like the previous version or the next version that it came up with, etc. Okay, so this is it right here. It's asking like, okay, well, was this better? Was it worse, etc. Right? I'm just going to say same, give it a little bit of information. But now one of the things that I'm going to do, hang on a second, I'll share, just sharing this. All right, I will open up another tab. So I mentioned the plugins a second ago. Let's see. All right, so I can't really easily switch in a live setting from browser to browser, but you can see here that there are a few plugins that I have up here at the top. One of them, this one right here, is a plugin that allows you to upload a PDF, right? So what that does is it then gives you a link, and what I typically do is I'll bookmark that link. It takes you to a companion site where then you upload the file. So rather than do that live, because unfortunately I don't have, it's not going to be easy to switch over. I'm just going to do it here, and I'll share and I'll show you the link that it provides. All right. No sessions, upload, here we are. Okay. So now it's uploading the document, and what that plugin does is it returns a link. So what I'm going to do, and so what I basically fed it was a bunch of social posts and writings that I had done, right? And so what I'm going to do, I'll hop back over here, is go into the window, right, and say, here is a link to previous social posts I've written. And the prompt, and again, this prompt is located in the deck that I'm sharing with you. I'll ask it to create a style guide based on this writing sample, right? So it will create a style guide. Oh. All right, so this is another little thing that you have to watch out with sometimes with Chat GPT, is that sometimes it'll tell you it can't do something that it absolutely can do, right? But rather than get into a back and forth with Chat GPT, thankfully, I saved the prompt and the style guide in my notes. So I will just take the writing style guide. And this is an example of what it comes back with, all right? So this is a style guide. It really does a great job of breaking down the particulars of, say, for instance, like the way I use social posts, etc., particularly on LinkedIn, so that I can easily apply it to something else. So what I'll do, edit using this writing style guide. So now what it's doing is it's rewriting that post that it gave me a few minutes ago and putting it a little bit more in the style that based on how I've written posts in the past. Now, there's still a few things here. For some reason, ChatGPT loves emojis and does a ton of emojis, more than I typically do. But that's okay. I might take a look at this and say, you know what, this is a good first draft. It might have taken me half an hour or an hour to get to this point. And from here, what I typically do is I would take this, copy and paste it, and take it into, I usually like to edit things in uh, uh, tools like Grammarly. But other people like to use tools like Notion, etc. Whatever it is, wherever it is that you like to draft and do your edits and everything, I would just take it there, and then I would go finesse it. Like, okay, I don't like this first line. I'm going to come up with something else. I don't like all these emojis. I'm going to edit them, etc. But like I said, the goal here is to get to a first draft, and then from there, customize it, make it your own, etc. The worst thing you want to do is take something directly from Chat GPT or mostly from Chat GPT and put it out there, as something that you created, for a couple of different reasons. One, after you work with Chat GPT or any sort of generative AI tool for a while, you start to notice certain patterns. You start to notice certain things that it likes to do. So pretty quickly, people will be able to figure out that you're taking stuff right out of Chat GPT and doing minimal amounts of edits and just posting it or sharing it or publishing it or doing whatever. Not a good idea. The other reason is, like I said before, ChatGPT is it's not very creative, and it's not human. It doesn't have a soul. So basically, if you over rely on it and you just take things directly out of ChatGPT, you're going to sort of like sound like everyone else, right? Everything that you kind of publish is going to be similar to what other folks can get elsewhere, and so why would they care? Why would they even want to read anything that you've written? And then the other downside is that ChatGPT does hallucinate, and I'll get into this in a little bit. It does plagiarize content. So, sometimes if you take it and you post it and don't really do any edits to it, you might end up with something that was written by someone else and not attributed, or something that is just completely made up. And that could lead to embarrassment. It could lead to reputational risk. And in some cases, it could lead to legal action. Okay. So that is, and the example here is I did a social post, but you can imagine how this could be anything, right? This could be, a press release. It could be a holding statement or whatever. Any type of writing that you want. I just suggest that you be as specific as possible. I tend to be very conversational with ChatGPT and tell it what you like or tell it what it is that you want. All right. So the next demo and the next prompt I'll give is how would you use ChatGPT? Let's see, we'll use it to create some messaging. So here's the prompt. So I just want to basically get a sample, right? Something that we can use because I didn't want to use a real piece of messaging, for the purposes of this example. So I'm going to prompt it now just to come up with something generic. And like I said before, I just gave it something specific to work from. Say, for instance, like, as if it's coming from a Fortune 500 technology company, and that it should be 500 words. So that's what it's creating for me now. Now, what's interesting is, and you'll see, like I said before, it does things, if there are existing formats for the examples that you give it, it'll do it pretty well. Now, I didn't give ChatGPT a lot of guidance for this prompt just because I just wanted something to work from, just some sort of milquetoast example to be able to use for the purposes of this demo. Typically, I would give it a lot more, but like I said, we just want to be able to create this because we want to be able to do something with it. So from here, the next prompt I'll take, and this is something that it could be very useful for anyone who's in PR, is this. Let's assume this was an internal statement. And of course, as we all know in this industry, anything that's internal is going to be external because somebody's going to leak it more than likely. So let's say, for instance, this was an internal statement. It leaked to a journalist, and now a journalist has reached out and wants to, discuss it with you or something like that, right? Um, you could actually prepare for that meeting or any type of meeting, right? I'm using this as just an example just to show you for the purpose of the demo. But the great thing is that you can tell ChatGPT to pretend that it's, say for instance, as a reporter for the New York Times covering the tech sector, and ask it what questions you would have based on this statement. Right. So I'll give it the prompt and it'll play the role of a New York Times journalist and come up with some questions. Right. Now, would those necessarily be the questions that Maggie Haberman would ask? Maybe, maybe not. Right. But the good thing is that you can kind of go from, okay, here's a statement, here's a piece of writing, here's something that I've done, and at least be able to get in the game with respect to some questions that you might expect to come up. That doesn't mean that there wouldn't be a fastball in a live interview, etc. There very well could be. But right here we've got 12 questions that someone could potentially ask based on the statement that we wrote. And so what you could do if you wanted to is come up with answers to those questions. You can even ask Chat GPT, come up with to these questions. And it'll come up with answers to the questions, right? And then, like I said before, from there, what I would do is not take what Chat GPT came up with verbatim, but I would then go and massage those questions. Okay, maybe what it came up with isn't exactly what I would say, or we wouldn't want to, we would do this instead of that, or whatever it might be. But in terms of getting prepared for an interview, or just even making your messaging better, being able to have a co-pilot essentially help you come up with questions and find holes in whatever it is that you wrote is very valuable. Okay. Now, I mentioned before that another great use case for ChatGPT is coming up with or getting prepared for a meeting, right? And it could be an interview, a job interview. It could be if you're on agency side and a new business pitch, whatever it might be. There are points in time where we're about to meet someone for the first time, and similar to what I showed you just a few minutes ago with respect to asking ChatGPT to pretend that it's a New York Times journalist and come up with a set of questions based on something you wrote, you can actually do like a mock interview with ChatGPT and ask it to play the role of someone that you're going to meet, and it'll have you can have it ask you questions in real time. So the prompt for that is here, and I'll type it into the window. Okay, so here's the prompt. Can you help me prepare for a senior communications role interview with a Fortune 500 tech CEO? Please ask questions as if you were the CEO and let me respond, and then provide follow-up questions or comments. So I'll go ahead and press enter. ChatGPT is always so enthusiastic. Absolutely, Chris. So you can see it asked question number one, and now it stopped, right? Because it's waiting for me to respond, right? Okay. So, you can kind of just do this in the same vein that I mentioned in a few minutes ago. Let's say if you spent 10 minutes or so just giving real answers, not like what I just did, but giving real answers as if, that you would when you're actually meeting with the person that you're planning to meet with. It can help you to kind of prepare, can help you to kind of think about things that you didn't anticipate or didn't think through. Oh, you know what? I hadn't thought about that question. And then prepare a better answer. You can save the whole session and save the questions that maybe stumped you, and then ask ChatGPT, what would be a better answer for this question? If you didn't have, if you weren't able to think of one yourself. And, once again, that co-pilot would be able to kind of like help you come up with an answer. Maybe you massage it, maybe it nails it the first time. But either way, it's great to be able to kind of like think of and cover all the bases. This is something that typically, 10 years ago or so, you'd call your best friend or someone like that and say, hey, can you role play with me So I can prepare for this meeting or interview that I have coming up. The challenge with that is that, like, it really depends on you having the right person. Um, and sometimes you might, and sometimes you might not. With ChatGPT, it's certainly going to have access to a huge data set, and a lot of times it's going to come up with at least a few really good questions in there that you might not have considered. So I think that's a really great tool and a great use case that I don't think a lot of people really think about in terms of like how they can use ChatGPT to really help them be more effective. All right, so that is it for the demos. I'm going to jump back over to the deck. All right. And like I said before, all of these are in the deck. And once again, I will share the link. I'll share this again at the end of the session too. Leave it up there for a couple seconds. Let's talk through some ethical considerations. And like I said before, there are many. I think the most obvious one is a lot of people are concerned that ChatGPT or generative AI is going to take their jobs. And while I don't think that, like I said, I'm not a doomsayer, I do think that for a lot of jobs that are easily automated are probably going to be impacted. And then I think there are other jobs that are going to be not necessarily eliminated, but really changed based on some of the capabilities that generative AI is able to provide. So, from an ethical perspective, I think there need to be conversations about how do we upskill people, right? Because what we don't want to have happen is we don't want to say, okay, well, if you don't know how to use these tools, you're not going to be employable in 5 years, right? So how do we train folks internally? How do we get them up to speed with using AI for their specific jobs? And it's going to be different for everybody. But I think those are conversations that have to happen from an ethical perspective. I would also say from an ethical, I mentioned before, plagiarism. I mentioned, transparency, right? So I'm always a big believer of being open and honest and transparent about your use of AI, no matter what it is, right? Whether it's using it for images, Mid-Journey, or some of the other great image generators, Chat GPT. It's not a dirty secret. And like I said before, you shouldn't be using it directly, just going and lifting things directly from Chat GPT and using it and sharing it with the external world. But, I think it's ethical and totally fine to let people know that you use Chat GPT to help you come up with drafts, to speed up the content creation process, to automate things, etc. And if there are challenges, and I know some companies have policies that restrict the use of Chat GPT or other generative AI tools in certain instances, obviously that's a conversation. But I think the first thing is you got to really be transparent. A lot of companies have privacy concerns. There are a number of creators who have sued OpenAI and other generative AI companies and tools, et cetera, because of the way that those tools have ingested their content in order to be able to create the large data set that they draw from. And that creates challenges, right? Another thing where it kind of gets a little bit murky is that you can tell ChatGPT, write XYZ, write this piece of content in the style of this writer, whether it's Shakespeare or whether it's your favorite reporter. That starts to get into some ethical gray areas, because obviously these tools have ingested all of that IP, and those people haven't been compensated in any way. So those are some challenges with respect to privacy, ethics, etc., that you really have to watch out for. And then also hallucinations. I mentioned that before. Basically, AI hallucinations are when it essentially makes something up, right? I don't know why they call it hallucination. It's not hallucinating like it took like some sort of drug or something like that. It just makes stuff up. It's almost kind of like a toddler, where you ask a toddler a question. If they don't know how to answer it, they might just make something up. That's what ChatGPT does. And there's some good examples that I'll kind of show you, but that's where you really have to watch out. You may have heard about this guy. He is the lawyer who was sanctioned for. He actually took a case His plaintiff was injured on an airline. He took a case that got to the federal court, and in his brief, he noted number of cases in case law purportedly that supported his cause. And then when the opposing lawyer dug into it a little bit more, they couldn't find those cases. And it turned out that this lawyer used Chat GPT to create his legal brief. And Chat GPT hallucinated and essentially made up a whole bunch of legal cases that supported his claims, right? And so obviously the judge found out, and as you can see, from this headline, huge embarrassment. The judge is, I haven't read the recent headlines. He may have already sanctioned him. This guy could get disbarred. It's hard to imagine he's ever going to get clients again. So obviously terrible turn of events for him. I'm not using Schadenfreude, but it's more of a cautionary tale of what could happen. If you do lift things out of ChatGPT and don't really go back and double check. ChatGPT makes up sources all the time. That's one of the things that it's not really great at just yet. It's not super good at like going out and finding sources and citing them. So sometimes it'll say something, it'll give you a quote, it'll give you a statistic, and then I'll go back and ask it and say, hey, where did you get that from? Can you cite that source? And then it'll say, oh, sorry, no, that's not correct. But if I hadn't flagged it, if I didn't know, then it would not have reversed itself. So that leads to another point, which is that you do have to know what you're doing, right? So I think some of the people who anticipated that some of these generative AI tools would just kind of like take over. You don't need writers, you don't need this or that. You do need subject matter experts, or things like this could happen. Here's another one. Someone asked who the sole survivor of the Titanic was. And ChatGPT just made something up, right? There was no sole survivor. There were about 700 plus survivors of the Titanic. But if you didn't know that, and you were doing research or you were writing something or whatever, and you took its answer based on a flawed question or prompt, that would really be a challenge for you. And once again, just like the previous example, it could lead to a lot of embarrassment and possibly even worse. So, be very mindful of some of these ethical considerations. The future of AI and PR, obviously, I think any of us who've read the headlines recently knows that not just recently, but going back for several years, a lot of newsrooms have been using AI to generate stories, especially for things like, say, for instance, areas that don't make a lot of sense for them to cover. A lot of times, if you read in news publications, say, for instance, like local sports, high school, it's, a score, something covering a local high school game or something like that. A lot of times AI has written that, not a human. Or even things that are more common, like earnings reports, etc. I remember speaking to a gentleman from Quartz years ago, well before the pandemic, who was talking about a studio that they had created. They called it something different at the time, but basically was using AI to generate stories. So it's a real thing, and I think it's only going to become more pronounced that we're going to see, probably not the more creative stories, etc. But I think we're going to start to see things that are like more formulaic, easy to automate. They're going to be taken over by GPT. And like I said, it's already happening now. I think in terms of practitioners, we're going to see more of a shift away from rote tasks in favor of high value activities. And that could be a good thing. If you think about most of our day is filled with a lot of stuff that we do constantly. There are things that we basically just change up a little bit, etc., or things that are just really kind of labor intensive, but aren't really don't take a lot of creative output or energy. I think that we're going to see a shift away from those, and I think that the tasks that can be automated will be automated eventually. So that's something I think is on the horizon in a not too distant future. And like I said before, there will be disruption. Those of us who've been around for a while know that with any of these technological advancements, there unfortunately are always people who are displaced, jobs that are displaced. To me, I think that it's best to be able to, like I said, train people up and help them to be able to pivot in their careers rather than leave folks behind. But, I think that leads to sort of like the last quote that I will share before we jump into the Q&A. It's not that AI is going to replace you, but a person using AI will. So that's where I think it's great that all of you guys who are interested in AI join the session. Keep that curiosity going, because I think the more that we can integrate AI into our workflow and make it a co-pilot, like I mentioned before, we're going to keep our skill sets current and make sure that, we're less likely to be disrupted. With that, I know we've got a few questions, so happy to take a little bit of Q&A. So Sonia thankfully left a few questions here in the chat. I'll just jump on the first one. What are the precautions one should take before uploading documents? So that's a really good question. Understand that when you upload documents into Chat GPT, or even when you copy and paste information into Chat GPT, it is being ingested into that language model's data set, right? It's possible that data could be reflected back to someone else if they prompt it the right way, right? So a lot of companies, for that reason, forbid their employees from uploading information to work-related information into Chat GPT, especially if there's intellectual property contained. So I think that let's say precautions I would take, say for instance, if I were going to do something, I came out of the agency world, but even if I were on the brand side, if I were going to upload something for work, a document for work into Chat GPT, I would more than likely anonymize it. If there was anything confidential there, I wouldn't do it. But I would anonymize. I would take out the name of the company if I could, if it made sense, or so. Any personal names of any individuals. Certainly, you don't want to have any personally identifiable information or anything like that. So, be very careful about what you upload. I typically upload very, very generic type stuff into Chat GPT. Because typically what I'm trying to do, like I said, is get to that first draft. The information that would be really sensitive, that's stuff that I would put in later. I'm just trying to kickstart my creativity and get things moving. But it's a great question, and it's a great consideration. And I think it's something that a lot of the answer to that question will vary wildly depending on the organization that you work for. What are my favorite plugins? What are your favorite plugins? Is there one that you can upload data points and ask ChatGPT to summarize or identify key points? So one of my favorite plugins is the upload plugin. That's a great one. I think that there's a web browsing plugin that's not quite there yet. It's getting there, but it's not quite there yet. I think they actually disabled it a little while ago. But that's a good one. But I think that my favorite one is the upload one, just simply because sometimes I just need to give it a lot of data and have it crunch it or distill it or summarize it for me. So from that perspective, it's very helpful. And it used to be really a big a task, because you would have to sort of like copy and paste, limited. So if you had like a 25-page report, you had to copy and paste a page or 2 or 3 at a time or so, and it just got very laborious. And in terms of there's not a plugin that can help you upload data points at the moment. But one thing I mentioned before is that outside of just the plugins, ChatGPT is now being integrated into a number of third-party tools. So I would go and check out the OpenAI website and take a look at the number of partners and some of the companies, or even Google, some of the headlines, and see which companies are implementing ChatGPT into their tools, into their software, just to make sure that something like that, if you're looking for it, exists. But I'm not aware of it at the moment. And that doesn't mean it doesn't. There are companies that are integrating ChatGPT every single day. Another question: is there a clever way to get ChatGPT to scan the internet for information up to September 2023? So that's the promise of that web browsing plugin. It doesn't do it that well. And to be honest with you, I've used Google Bard a lot, and Google Bard doesn't have the limitation where it's only ingested data up until 2021. Bard is built on Google's obviously search engine, and then there's also um, Microsoft has a version with Bing that it is able to do as well. I can say I've played around with all of those, and none of them does a great job. Bard, for whatever reason, and I haven't played around with it in the past month or so, but like for whatever reason, it would always default to Forbes. I love Forbes, but that's not the only place I want to get data. Um, and you know, and it's very hit or miss. I would say that's one of the things that I think has got to be hopefully on the horizon for upgrades for Chat GPT and other generative AI tools, is that you know, we want to be able to get out to the web and get more real-time information in an accurate manner, you know, something that you can rely on. But I will say this: if you're able to you know, and it's, again, it's a little bit tedious, but if you know, if you have, like, if, say for instance, if you know where those sources of information are, and you're able to copy and paste that into Chat GPT, that's probably the way to go. But in terms of it discovering it, it's not quite there yet. And quite frankly, I would not rely on the results that you get from it, even with the plugins. Does Chat GPT handle Spanish language or any other languages? Chat GPT does handle multiple languages, including Spanish. Chat GPT is also really good at translating. Actually, that's not something that I brought up before, but it does a good job of translating. You know, so if you take data from one, you know, say English, and you want to translate it into a couple of different languages, it does a pretty good job of that. Now, again, the same caveat from before: I would not, like, if you don't speak Spanish fluently, I wouldn't rely on it, because you won't be able to check it and make sure that what it gave you back is accurate, right? So that's the limitation. But if you are familiar with, you know, with the language that you're translating to, and you just want to save time, I think ChatGPT does a pretty decent job of that. Have you used ChatGPT for any PR and analytics projects beyond content creation? um, so I've used ChatGPT for analytics, mostly for crunching data, taking large amounts of data, big, you know, reports, things like that, and then being able to distill insights. ChatGPT is not great. So, you know, if you want to be able to kind of like really do complex analyses, you need to have, now you're getting into things like you know, I don't want to get too complex with this, but there are tools, there's technology like one called Auto GPT where you can have ChatGPT run a process with another application, you know, to be able to kind of do multiple things. You know, so you could have it run a script and do a process with Excel or something else. But I would say that, like, what it does the best job of doing is copying data that exists and analyzing it based on what you've given it. So, you know, I think that that's something that is going to obviously improve on, especially once it has the ability to kind of like surf the internet and come up with better real-time information. But I'd say for certain things like, you know, social media analysis, for media analysis, for certain other things, etc., it does a pretty good job, but you do have to force feed it. Oh, we have a clarifying question, not talking about using ChatGPT to translate. Can you ask it a question in Spanish and have it write up an assignment in that language? Yeah, I'm almost 100% certain that you can switch languages on ChatGPT, or set languages. I believe that it has a pretty large set of languages that it uses, and I have to imagine that Spanish is one of them. So I believe the answer is yes. I'm not 100% certain, but I think I'm about 95% certain that the answer is yes. All right, so I see we're almost up against time. I'm going to bring the wonderful Sonia Diaz back onto the stage. Sonia, thank you so much for having me. This was so much fun.
No, thank you for being here. I think that we could be here for another hour. I will testify to the fact that we added the we upgraded for $20 a month, and we created an infographic for a client today with their own stats and their own things, with the Canva plugin, which I think was just released like 4 days ago. And Chat GPT seems to be having an overwhelming demand today. So it asked me to wait a minute because there's a lot of people online. I think that for those of us that need to create things quickly, design-wise, and can't really afford to wait for the graphic design team, or maybe don't even have that available to us, it's very helpful. So I hope that everybody found this really useful. Do you have somewhere where they can write to you if anybody here wants to maybe bring you on board to do a training for their teams? How can they contact you?
Yep. So I've got the the link on my website, and full disclosure, it's still the landing page is complete, but the rest of it's not. Still work in progress. So don't go beyond that if you find it. But you can go to chrisg.me/HPRA, and there you'll find the download button to be able to download the PDF that I shared today, and then also. To stay in touch, there's an email capture form. You just leave your name and your email. So that'll help you to kind of stay in touch with me. But also, there are trainings. There's a lot of demand around this, and I get asked every day, hey, do you have something coming up or whatever? So I'm actually taking the basic information that we went over today and turning it into a mini course that'll be, maybe a couple of hours or so, that'll dive a little bit more into some of the things that I touched on today. So, if you're interested in that, feel free to sign up, and be put on a wait list. I'm putting the finishing touches on it over the next couple of weeks or so. But if you want to be notified once it's ready, sign up for that newsletter or email, and then you'll be able to, I'll send out the notification as soon as it's ready.
Perfect. And I thought you had an amazing quote, and a lot of people in the chat were like, oh, what a great way to say it, that AI will not replace you. Somebody using AI will. So I think that that's a great way to kind of end this, and, be proud of yourselves for being willing to take an hour out of your day to come and learn a little bit more, make your teams a little bit more efficient. Somebody wanted to ask about your PowerPoint. Are you going to make it available? I think you touched on this at the beginning, but are you going to make it available for download, or accessible for folks?
Yes. So if you go over to the chrisg.me/HPRA link that's right here, right below, you'll be able to access the PowerPoint. If for some reason you can't, my email is chris@chrisg.me. So just go ahead and email me if for some reason it doesn't work, or it's broken link or something like that. I checked it just before we went live, so I think it's working. But if there's anything for whatever reason, just email me at chris@chrisg.me, and I'll make sure you get it.
Okay. Perfect. So once again, I want to thank our corporate and our agency sponsors that make it possible for us to provide this programming. I want to thank you for being here. I'm so excited that you were able to do this for everybody. If you guys want to stay in touch with us and have information about, sessions that we might have in the future, just go to hprausa.org, and you go to the bottom of the homepage, subscribe to our newsletter, and you can stay in the know about what we have coming up. Thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful Tuesday and a wonderful week.
All right. Thank you.
Bye.
And